NBC4's Robert Kovacic joins us now with today's key developments. Robert.
Carolyn, President Trump calling this a, quote, big day for world peace. And as Iran starts the reconstruction process, the president claims this could be the golden age of the Middle East. However, President Trump also asserting late tonight the U.S. will be hanging around, in his words, to make sure everything goes well as the ceasefire begins.
Less than 90 minutes before President Trump's 8 p.m. Eastern deadline, the president announced on social media that a deal had been struck. It pauses fighting between the U.S., Israel, and Iran for 2 weeks so that the three countries can negotiate a permanent end to the war. The president deciding he would not follow through on threats to attack Iran's infrastructure like power plants and bridges, as long as Iran agrees to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz.
Every power plant in Iran will be out of business, burning, exploding, and never to be used again.
Pakistan has been mediating negotiations between the U.S. and Iran and presented a 10-point peace proposal from the Iranians to the U.S. President Trump called it a workable basis on which to negotiate. The ceasefire comes after a tense day, which started with President Trump posting on social media, "A whole civilization will die tonight, and I don't want it to happen, but it probably will." The post drew outrage and condemnation around the world. Dozens of congressional Democrats calling for Trump to be impeached or removed, and now accusing the president of leaving the U.S. in a worse position than before the war began.
Donald Trump has agreed to give Iran control of the Strait of Hormuz.
Countries and embassies in the Middle East urged people to stay home as the deadline drew near, and Iranian officials urged people to surround potential targets as human shields. Both Iran and Israel say they have agreed to the ceasefire. Iran's foreign affairs minister posting on X, for a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible.
At this hour, stock futures surging on the news and the price of oil quickly dropping, now below $100 a barrel. Iran claims negotiations for a permanent end to the war will begin Friday in Pakistan. Late tonight, the White House press secretary posting on social media there are discussions about in-person talks, but nothing is final until announced by the president or the White House. I'm Robert Kovacic. Carolyn?
All right, Robert, thank you for that. Many in LA's Iranian community are feeling relieved after learning of the 2-week ceasefire. Little Persia in Westwood is home to dozens of Iranian businesses, and some people living and working here in Southern California woke up today fearing for their loved ones still in Iran. Others thought the president was bluffing, not believing the U.S. would attack civilians.
Bombing the bridges and then power plant and water resources, but maybe he would do that, but he wouldn't do on people.
We all want a resolution. We want the people in Iran to feel safe. We want us Americans here to feel safe. And it's a lot of question marks, to be honest with you.
And nearby on UCLA's campus, several demonstrators held signs in protest of the president's threats. Well, the FBI is warning that Iranian hackers are trying to disrupt U.S. industrial systems. NBC4's Macy Jenkins is monitoring that part of the story for us from the newsroom. Macy.
Well, hi, Carolyn. The war in Iran is now in its 5th week, marked by thousands of missile strikes on the country launched by the U.S. and Israel. And while Iran has launched its own retaliatory missiles, the U.S. government is now warning of a more surreptitious attack.
This is like the chaos without permanence.
A federal cybersecurity advisory released on Tuesday warns Iranian hackers are actively targeting control systems of U.S. infrastructure sectors like government, water, and energy services. Cybersecurity expert Shane Barney, who spent part of his career at the Department of Homeland Security, says it's a tactic to spread fear amongst Americans.
You know, this is what modern warfare has become. Shut off somebody's water or disrupt their water in some way or disrupt their electricity in some way. That's significant. That gets people's attention real quick.
He says these kinds of hackers are driven less by money and more by ideology.
It's very intelligent people. People have been doing this for a long time. They're willing to sit there and live off the land, as they say, and wait for an opportunity to strike.
The advisory, issued by several federal agencies, including the FBI, NSA, and EPA, says the hackers are targeting technology made by Rockwell Automation, a Wisconsin-based company that provides hardware and software to other companies to digitize, automate, and control a range of services. But Barney warns the hackers won't stop with just one company.
What they're really doing is they're testing the resilience of the entire U.S. supply chain. It really is that large.
The advisory notes several disruptions across the country, but it's unclear how significant they've been. Barney's outlook?
I don't think it'll be widespread. You're not talking like an entire outage of the East Coast, for example. But you could see localized impacts, and anything that causes that becomes more of a scaremongering tactic and less about the actual impact.
The government's advice for utility companies and municipalities with internet-based controller systems is to take those systems offline and use a secure gateway and firewall. For everyone else,
for the average citizen, this means that the national security now extends to local utility level. And for organizations especially, it means that trusted internal networks can no longer be assumed secure.
Barney says the U.S. has faced threats to critical infrastructure in the past, but not in a retaliatory manner from a country at war with the U.S. The best things Americans can do, he says, is to stay informed and stay abreast of the latest communication from your utility company. Reporting live in the newsroom tonight, Macy Jenkins, NBC4 News.
Good advice, Macy. Well, much more coverage is being updated 24/7 online. You can see how conservative influencers are reacting and the latest message from the Pope. It's all up right now on our website, NBCLA.com, and the NBCLA app. All right, let's head outside right now. This is a live look from Long Beach this evening. Meteorologist Melissa McGee is tracking some changes in the First Alert forecast.
And we're going to be waking up with clouds and fog as we get into our Wednesday morning for the coast and the basin. But once we head into the mid-morning hours and beyond, a lot of sunshine. Temperatures once again on your Wednesday maxing out in the upper 70s and the lower 80s, very similar to what we had on our Tuesday. Satellite and radar showing you what we're tracking over the weekend out in the Pacific. This heads our way as we head into late Friday, into our Saturday, into our Sunday. So widespread rain will be on the way this upcoming weekend. Let's talk about the weather headlines. Tomorrow on your Wednesday, fog to some sunshine, temperatures slightly milder in some spots. Then on Thursday, that onshore flow does develop, so it will be turning cooler, more clouds around the region. And then this weekend, widespread rain. The wettest day looks to be on Saturday. We'll talk about those details coming up with your First Alert forecast.
Well, it has been nearly 24 hours since this massive fire erupted in a warehouse in Ontario. Tonight, firefighters are still putting out hot spots, and we're learning a man with a connection to that business is suspected of arson. NBC4's Tracy Leong has new details about the suspect.
Investigators believe this massive fire at the Kimberly-Clark Corporation warehouse in Ontario was intentionally set by an employee associated with the company. About 175 firefighters responded to the 6-alarm fire near Hellman and Merrill Avenues, which was reported just after midnight Monday.
Definitely was uncharacteristic fire. Just the fire behavior that they were experiencing inside and the rapid spread of that fire for such a large building. To move that quickly, it definitely pushed our firefighters into that defensive operation, and that was one indication that it could possibly be an arson of nature.
Police arrested 29-year-old Chamil Abdul Karim of Highland for arson. He's being held without bail and faces multiple felony charges. Officials say Karim was at the scene of the fire when it started and works for NFI Industries, which is a third-party distributor of Kimberly-Clark. Investigators say 20 Kimberly-Clark employees were inside when the fire started. They all made it out safely without any injuries.
I just smelled the smoke, and then we all started just running out the building. We're hoping to get transferred to another NFI building, but we're still waiting on the contact.
Kimberly-Clark is a consumer goods and personal care business that produces mostly paper-based sanitary products. The fire caused major damage to the 1 million square foot building and the semi-trucks parked near the loading area. Reporting in Ontario, Tracy Leong, NBC4 News.
Now to Beverly Crest, where firefighters have knocked down a mansion fire that burned for more than 4 hours today. This is off Beverly Glen Boulevard. That fire engulfed the attic and roof of the 24,000 square foot home. Nearly 150 firefighters were called to the scene. One firefighter was hospitalized with a medical issue. Another was treated for heat exhaustion. No word yet on the cause. Another fire frightened members of a Hollywood landmark tonight. Dozens of firefighters responded to the Magic Castle just before 5:30. Smoke poured from the roof of the Victorian building after fire broke out in the attic. Everyone inside was evacuated. No one was injured. The owner says repairs will be done as quickly as possible so they can reopen, but at this point, he doesn't know when that will be. The family of a man killed by LAPD officers in Westmont last week says it has video that contradicts the police department version about what happened. 45-year-old Elias Real was shot to death on April 3rd after the LAPD says officers tried to detain him for another shooting that had just happened at 115th Street in Vermont. LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell says he was armed with a 9mm ghost gun, which he turned toward officers. Now, the video shared by the family's attorney this morning appears to show Real walking away from police. He is not seen turning around, and it is not clear from that video whether or not he was armed. We have paused the video so you don't see the